Welcome back, everybody, to the Sunday's Coming podcast. If you are new around here, or if you just started in this conversation, you should go back to last week and hear part 1 with our friend Nick, talking about all of the things creative and storytelling and everything that he's doing in his life. Super excited for this next part and part 2 of this episode. And so thanks for hanging around with us for a little bit longer to keep this conversation going. We could probably do 3 or 4 parts, but we're going to try to keep it to 2.
Discipline.
During our break, I was like, I saw Kaleb in the hallway. I'm like, I really got to ask him about this Nebraska story that he mentioned. So again, if you haven't listened to part 1, please go back to part 1. I would love to know how that story came to be of you losing your keys in a field in Nebraska on your way moving from
because it seems
California.
to have been so pivotal in your trajectory. So
yes,
it must have been pretty special.
The crazy thing is, it actually is incredibly pivotal. Okay, where do I start? So my family and I had made the decision to move from California, Southern California, to the Chicago area to take a job as part of Willow Creek. And we put all of our belongings into one of those giant moving trucks. And then my wife and our 2 kids at the time, we've got 3 kids now, but 2 kids at the time, they got on a plane. And me and the dog got in a car. And
is this the dog you like or the dog you don't like?
Yeah, because we had a conversation earlier about I have 2 dogs, only one would I ever bring to work. Yep. I love them both dearly. Unfortunately, this dog is no longer with us, but there was no way he was going to survive a plane trip. Sure. He was a little too nervous for that kind of stuff. And so it was just him and I doing this cross-country road trip. And it was like a week before Christmas. It was the first Christmas I had off in years because of being in church ministry, you know? And so I was kind of thrilled about this idea of getting to take this cross-country road trip, just me and the dog. But if you've ever done a cross-country road trip, you basically drive for 8 hours straight, and about an hour of it is interesting, you know? And that was pretty much the case. Me and the dog, we would drive all day. We'd crash in some seedy hotel just to make it as cheap as possible in the evening. Next day, we'd get up and do it all over again. And he was great about it. But it was day 3, and my dog, we're like halfway through the day, and he's in the back, and he just starts whimpering. And it's like his very gentle, passive-aggressive way of saying, like, is this my life now? Like, is this all we do? We just drive and I can never go potty. And so I'm like, okay, like, first chance I get, we will pull over and play or something. So I'm driving through Nebraska. It's snowing just a little bit. And I pull over into this rest stop. And it's not until I pull into the rest stop that I realize it's actually abandoned. Like, it's not, you can't even go to the bathroom anymore, right? I'm like, oh, okay, well, but we park. And if you jump this fence, there's just this huge field. I mean, probably, I'm not great at this, but probably 20 or 30 acres in my estimation, right? And I'm like, this dog just needs permission to run. Yep. And it's totally fenced in, right? So we jump the fence and he just runs. And like, I'm throwing sticks. He fails to fetch any of them. But like at one point, I'm like tackling him and we're like wrestling on the ground because I think I need it just as bad as he does. And we just played for like an hour. I was like, we can sacrifice an hour of this trip. We'll still make it to I think it was our last hotel in time. And I'm headed back to the car and I reach into my coat pocket and I do not have my keys. And I could specifically remember checking them in my pocket as like right before I had jumped the fence. And this feeling of horror that came over me as I turn and look back at this field. And we have been all over it by this time. all over it. And now it's like late afternoon, like the sun's getting kind of low.
Yep.
And so at the time I had AAA. Remember AAA?
Oh yeah, dude.
Do people not have that anymore?
Right. I don't.
I mean, I'm not saying you should, but is it like offering worse service than it used to?
I think it's the same service. It's just
we've realized we don't need it.
Who needs
I
it?
see. Okay,
Yes.
fair enough. I don't have it, but
I have keys. I don't have keys. And so I do need some help. So I call AAA and they tell me, well, the bad news is we do not have anyone who can help you within 150 miles.
Oh my gosh.
So if you need our help, you're just going to have to wait. And I'm like, I definitely need your help. I'm at an abandoned rest stop in the middle of Nebraska. It's winter. The sun's going down. And so the person I'm on the phone with, they're like, okay, well, we might have some other solutions. They wrote down my number. They're like, we're going to call you back in 15 minutes. Great. 15 minutes goes by. 30 minutes. An hour. And I'm like, why hasn't AAA called me back? And I look at my phone and I don't even have service anymore.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm walking around.
Oh,
I'm walking around this parking lot, just waving my phone around, trying to get service. And I start to panic. And so I run out into the middle of the field. And I don't even know where to start, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to back all the way up because here's the thing. I didn't even want to be there. So again, the whole move was happening because I had taken a job at Willow Creek.
Yeah.
A job I had never wanted. I got a random email one day when I was working at this church in California that was like, hey, we've seen some of your stuff. We're looking to hire a creative director. Would you be interested in applying?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, thanks. And I went home that night and I almost didn't even tell my wife. It was like non-information, right? And she's making dinner. I'm sitting there. And I was like, you know what? I got the weirdest email today. And I told her about it and she burst into tears. It's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
And she said, I have been sensing for months that a big change was coming for our family. And she said she had had lunch with a girlfriend that day. And she said, today was the first time I said it out loud. She had told her best friend, I think a big change is coming for us. And so we're like, oh, okay. But I said no, but maybe God's up to something. And it started this 4-month journey of God making it so clear where he wanted us. I think God sometimes he calls us to a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And this is one of those situations where it became an act of obedience, not really discernment.
Yeah.
The discernment was clear. We were supposed to go. And but in some ways I went kicking and screaming because we loved our life. And this changed everything for us. And at the same time, God he helps you to want the things he wants.
Yeah.
And we saw that happening in our hearts. But anyway, suddenly I find myself in the middle of this field in Nebraska and panicked and frustrated. And I'm literally on my hands and knees feeling around for keys in the grass. And I finally just sat down and I was so angry because I said, God, you're the one who got me here. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be sitting here. And my prayer essentially consisted of me saying, God, I know you can see my stupid keys right now. Will you tell me where they are? And I stood up and I made a direct line 20 yards to a spot. And I took a breath and I looked down and my keys were sitting at the toe of my boots.
And I went back and I got in the car and I just started driving home, just thanking God that even when we feel lost on our way, and especially when we feel lost on our way to the places we know He's called us, He has us. It was another in a long string of Him just saying, I've got this. Yeah. So finished my trip.
That's amazing, man. It's such an incredible, I think reminder. I love the way you just, you described kicking and screaming, leaving. There's been a handful of scenarios in my life that's been the case and not something that I wanted to do at all. But it was so ultimately clear. This is where God's leading, my wife and I and our family.
Yep.
And I don't know why. And it seems like it's not going to be super fun or great because you're leaving an incredible place or church or, environment, friends, family. That's awesome, man. I love hearing that. And I think it's so interesting going back to, thinking back to now last week's episode.
Yeah.
And you were describing that moment in that programming meeting.
Yeah.
And somebody's going, you should tell that story.
I can see why they said you should tell that story.
I can see why that too. Because it is powerful, man. And it's such the field is a metaphor. Everything about that is a metaphor.
Everything about it is a metaphor.
Yeah.
And it's taught me again and again, even in different seasons, of God like pointing back to that moment and being like, okay, can we remember the ways that I show up?
Yeah.
So I think that's actually a great setup for the conversation we're going to have now, because you talk about hard transitions and hard changes and, things that you can't really see how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking about before this conversation was you were sharing how in your own career, in your own journey as a creative, you're kind of looking down the road and thinking about what does it mean to transition from sort of what you've been doing thus far in your career as someone who is, a primary driver in the creative process, someone that's bringing a lot of the content, someone that's actually doing a lot of the work. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking about what does it look like for you to move from that active creator role to more of a coach that's raising up the next generation of people that are doing that work.
Yeah.
And how do you make a transition like that? What does it look like practically in the context that you're in now? I mean, I'd just be curious, like what was the thing maybe to start out that even ignited that question in your mind and had you start to kind of flesh through what a transition like that looks like? Because I think if we're honest, no matter where we are in our ministry journey or our, professional journey or whatever, we're either in that season right now and we haven't wanted to admit it or we've been scared to admit it, or we're not that, you're never that far away from being there, a couple years down the road. So I'm just curious what that has looked like for you.
Yeah. Backing up a little bit, I said that I went to Willow kicking and screaming, and I will also say that those are some of the best years of my life. I learned so much about who I was and about how to be a creator and how to be a creator at scale when the demands are really high. And I got so much better as a writer. I got so much better as a leader during my time there. But toward the end of my tenure, I was starting to feel this inner pull of I have been given a platform. I have been given gifts and instinct, and the time's coming that I need to hand that off. And how do I do that really well? How do I empower the people around me? For the longest time, our description of what a creative director was meant to do was they are the idea engine. And in part, that's exhausting. It's super fun, and it's exhausting to always be the person who's supposed to have the ideas. And so I think some of it was probably even selfish of just like, I'd love to spread some of that responsibility around a little bit. But I think there were some altruistic motives in there too of, gosh, I've been given so much trust and so much influence. because again, when you tell stories, you are doing powerful pastoral kind of work in the lives of people. You are marking moments for them. You are creating memories. The number of people who come up and they can remember a specific story you told from years and years and years ago, and they can tell you stories of how it changed the trajectory of their story. Like, these are incredibly powerful experiences. And I just started to feel like it is selfish of me to hold these in quite the solo way that I am. And that being said, like we were always being collaborative. There was always a team that would make all of those things happen. But I tended to be a front-facing person. And again, was the idea engine. The buck sort of stopped with me. And I started to feel in my heart, like, I think it's time for a season of humility, to wear this role differently. And what would it look like to start giving that power and opportunity away to other people? And it was interesting that it was as I was starting to think about that and starting to dream about that and starting to put some plans into motion at Willow, that God made it pretty clear that my time there was done. Like I said, my call to Willow was super clear, and my call out of it was just as clear. And it was pretty bewildering to me because suddenly I had this like kind of new mission that was what I thought was supposed to be for the next season.
Yeah.
And now I didn't have a place to do it.
No.
All of the things that I had been trying to give away, I didn't have anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't have platform, position, power, audience, any of those things. And it was like, what? It was very curious for me because I was wondering, the things I was asking of God is why would you, because altruistic feelings don't come from me. Like, that is the grace of God working in me. So I was wondering, God, why are you doing these things in me and then taking away the very things I want to give away? So then I started the season of discernment after I left Willow, going, what is next for me? And it was a unique season because, like I said, because I was called to Willow and knew that so clearly, especially toward the end of my time, when, if you know anything about the history, there were a really painful couple years at the end of my time there. But because I knew I was supposed to be there, I didn't care what my job was anymore. I just wanted to help. And so I took on a lot of responsibilities that didn't look like creative director anymore. When I left, suddenly God was freeing me up to ask a different kind of question of like, if I'm not called to a place anymore, what am I called to? So I invited a lot of mentors and people into my life to help me discern in that season. And there's also two pivotal books that I read. One of them is a book called Falling Upward by Richard Rohr. And the other one is called The Second Mountain by David Brooks. And I read them pretty much back to back, had picked them up both. One of them had been gifted to me like 6 years. The Richard Rohr book had been gifted to me like 6 years earlier and had sat on my bedside table unread. Yep. And the David Brooks book I had picked up just as I was headed out the door. And they were mirror images of the same message in so many ways, of basically laying out this idea that the first half of our lives is about building our kingdom, in a sense. You're building your ego. You're figuring out who you are and what you're good at. You are making a name for yourself in whatever sphere or world, church, life. You are building family. Like, it's all of this like builder mentality. And much of it is very self-serving. But it was saying that there is meant to be this very natural progression as you hit midlife or a little bit later, where you no longer need to build those things. Maybe you haven't achieved everything you want to achieve, but at some point, you know yourself well enough. You know what you're good enough, well enough, that you can get out of the way enough to let other people learn how to do it too. And that so echoed what God had been doing in me and what I had been sensing needed to happen. And so I started looking at a lot of different roles in churches, much more leadership kinds of roles, where I could do that with a staff team or something like that. But it became pretty apparent to me pretty quickly, and probably even more apparent to my wife, that I was so tired after my last church season that I wasn't in a position to do that, to work in a church, but also to lead in quite that way. And so it was interesting because it felt like God was stirring up all these things in me and then letting them drop and then stirring them up again and letting them drop. And so that discernment process of what was going to be next, what was I called to do? If you listened to last week, it culminated in this campfire in my backyard with me and my best friend. And I said, man, I still want to tell stories. There's this verse out of, so one of my good friends that I had invited into this whole discernment process with me, I asked people to pray for me for a couple weeks and then come back and share anything that they felt like they had heard from God. And I'm on the phone with her and she's like, I feel like what God kept asking me to ask you is, what's your name? And at first I was a little offended because you've been praying for me for 2 weeks and you can't remember my name. But she's like, of course, that's not what I'm talking about. She said, at a pretty pivotal moment in my life, she said that she felt she had been reading in, I think it's the book of Isaiah, about being the rebuilder of broken things. And she's like, I think there are names that God has for us, the way that we get talked about in heaven. And she said, when I read that verse, I felt like that was God saying my name. She's like, have you ever asked God what your name is? Because I think he'd probably love to tell you. And it was not 24 hours later that I read in Daniel chapter 2, verse 22. It says, he reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. And I was like, that's my name. Revealer of deep and hidden things through story. That's the vehicle you've given me. So again, that night around the fire, I was like, I think I'm still called to tell stories. That's what God has uniquely given me, but I have all these ideas and I don't know how to make any of it happen. My friend was like, I don't have all the right ideas, but I know how to make stuff happen. And so that's where we started dreaming about Braving Bird. How could we resource the church? How could we tell stories that reveal the deep and hidden things of God and then give them away for free? Because we both worked in churches. We'd known what the grind looked like. We wanted to continue resourcing churches while not necessarily working at one.
Yeah.
And so we started building this thing, but it was such a strange, it felt like I was building something all over again. It felt like I was building another little kingdom, like building my ego again. But pretty early on, we started having a conversation about just at some point and some point soon, we got to give this thing away. Not give the whole organization away, but just the responsibility for ideas, this responsibility for creating. For one, we felt like the dream God was giving us was bigger than the two of us.
Yeah.
But then also, the time was going to come for us to get out of the way. And so it feels like that's it's the internal conversation I'm constantly having with God right now, but it's also kind of the internal conversation we're having at Braving Bird. Right now, if I got hit by a bus, I'm our only creative director at Braving Bird. That's not to say all ideas are going to stop, but it's definitely going to, hit the pause button for a while. And for the future of our organization, but also just for the good of the church, for the good of me too, and my own ego, it's good. We're trying to figure out how do we give that away and raise up new voices.
Yeah.
The Worship Classic is back, and this year it is going to Dallas, Texas. You do not want to miss it. It's the only free golf tournament for church leaders. Head to theworshipclassic.org today to register your team for free, and we'll see you there.
We were talking in our last conversation around creating space to fail.
Yeah.
And as I kind of listen to what you're saying, I think about what you're building as far as an environment with Braving Bird is you're creating a place where you have the ability to allow younger leaders, younger creatives to come in and have a safe place to try things and iterate and maybe go down the wrong path for a little bit. But so much of that is, you were talking about building a kingdom a minute ago. It's like, it's what do you view the purpose of your kingdom as being?
Yeah.
You have to create something to create an environment. And is that environment there to serve your goals and outcomes and vision, or is it there to create an environment for other people to actually discover their goals and vision and skill and things like that?
Yeah, the title of creative director can mean really different things. It can sometimes just be a catch-all for all kinds of stuff, And I've worked at a couple different churches where creative director meant something really, really different. I worked at a church in Orange County where creative director, what it really meant was a pastor to creatives, where my job was to help awaken them to their usefulness in the kingdom of God, and then to draw out, empower, and make possible their ideas. Mm-hmm. When I came to Willow, the expectation was totally different. It was, we have hired you to be the idea and to make it happen. Yeah. And both of those were so fulfilling in really different ways. And I think what I'm looking to do now is, what is the hybrid of those things? Yeah. Like, God's still going to give me ideas. Yeah. God's still going to tell me stories that I want to tell. But how can I also empower the stories other people want to tell? And just practically, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about this, honestly. Practically, one of the things I'm really excited about that we are experimenting with right now is identifying new voices, new filmmakers, and basically floating them a micro budget to make a micro film. And giving them the coaching, helping them develop their story and develop their script and walk through the process and connecting them to the collaborators they need to make those small projects come to fruition. But again, already, we haven't even tried that many of them, but already not all of them have been successful. Some of them, and maybe they will still end up successful, but right now they're stuck. Yeah. But it feels like that's what we're trying to do. Exactly what you said, Kaleb, is creating a space where they can fail, where the stakes aren't crazy high, but at the same time, the expectations are high. We want the best. We want you to be better at the end of this process than you were when you started. But if you fail, we haven't lost a ton of money. You haven't lost a lot of face. Yeah. It gives us an opportunity for discovery. And not all of those are going to pan out, but that's okay.
Yeah. It's, I've said it so many times, somebody took a chance on me.
Yes.
When I was 20, 21 years old, had zero clue how to do anything in ministry. And somebody said, yeah, we'll hire you.
Yeah.
Are you sure? But I'm going to sign it before you can take it back,
Yeah.
But somebody took a chance on me, and through those opportunities and continued to over, the last 12 years of my life, and gone, hey, do you want to do that? And the saying yes, or the learning and making mistakes. But I just go back to, man, if we are not developing the leaders below us, what do we think is going to happen to the rest of the world? And this is not even just in creative. This is in every, area of our lives. And developing that, kind of new, the young filmmaker for you, that's it's more accessible than it's ever been. I can go buy a camera, I can shoot amazing looking content, and have no idea what I'm doing, but to have somebody who's done this for years and years, like you and the rest of the team, to go, here's how you refine that. This is how you can make this better, is really, really awesome. That's such an incredible opportunity.
I think one of the things that I think can be one of the biggest threats to giving this away to other people is pace. I think if you're moving too fast, it makes
it doesn't leave room for failure anymore. It doesn't leave room for learning. One of the things we're committed to on set with Braving Bird is going really slow. We usually plan way more time than we actually need, so that we can be in relationship and so that we can invite people onto the set who have no experience and tons of passion and want to see what it looks like behind the scenes. And by going slow in our process, it lets them come along and ask questions. And we were in production for a couple of days on a project a couple months ago, and someone who had never been on set with us before, they were like, "Is it always this chill?" And we're like, "It's never this chill, except for our projects, because we have chosen that it will be chill, because relationship and learning is as important as the product." So
I think that what you just said there is so important to kind of drill into, is that the kind of environment that you're creating, you're choosing to create.
Yeah.
Like whether it's on set or in a staff culture, a workplace, a job site, whatever, like you're making intentional decisions or unintentional decisions. Honestly, you maybe haven't even interrogated the decisions you're making, but they're all adding up to create a certain kind of experience for the people there. And so I think as leaders, it's really important for us to say, what is the experience that I want for the people that are involved with me in whatever way? And am I doing the things, am I taking the steps to create that intentionally?
And it will require sacrifice. I mean, we make less projects than we could if we went faster.
Yeah.
We spend more money on projects because they take longer. Like, because we spend more money in man hours and for those contractors that we're inviting into the process and stuff. But we've made a really intentional decision to go slow. And I believe that those sacrifices pay off in ways that you often can't quantify with dollar signs.
Yeah. And I think it's, it would be very unique as a young filmmaker to walk in to a set. Maybe they're a contractor and have showed up at other shoots and they're like, this is not the pace that I'm used to. But there's the intentionality in doing it like that, just like you're saying, creates a completely different outcome because of your intentionality to do that. And, we have people, fill out these questionnaires before we come on the podcast to help us, understand, hey, how we're going to approach this conversation.
Yeah.
And one of the things you wrote, is as you left church, it would have been really, really easy for the pace to go even faster and greater than what you were doing before, because now it's your own. You don't have this luxury of an organization that's letting you do these things or like a church or whatever. You're building the thing that you want to build, and to get there, you could do it really fast to try to do it better, or you could do it really, really slow and intentional. It goes back to you guys have been doing this for a couple of years before you actually announced that you were a thing.
Yeah.
Because that was, how long was it that you guys were actually shooting and doing projects leading up into, hey, we're a company?
We were for almost a year. It was just me and my co-founder, and this was during COVID. So it was like in the home office that was really my daughter's bedroom, dreaming okay, but how do you become a 501c3? It was from that to then another year of dreaming about and scripting and writing and producing projects to then finally, we were 2.5 years in, I think, before
it's amazing,
before anybody knew we existed, because we were just doing it all behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But again, our jobs for years had demanded a lot of us and had demanded a lot of our families. And suddenly we were given this opportunity to make a different choice. And conventional wisdom tells you when you're starting something new, when you're starting a business, you got to go hard and it has to have 110% of you. And we just said, we believe that God is behind this, that He is the catalyst for this idea. Therefore, let's not start believing that our pace will further contribute to what He wants to do.
Yeah.
And so for the sake of our families, for the sake of our own mental health, because I I mean, we had a lot of healing left to do. We chose to go slow.
Yeah. And I think it's also just because, when God has revealed this thing that he's calling you into, I think sometimes we look at that and go, well, we have to catch up to whatever his plan is. And we have to run as fast and as hard as we possibly can because we know this is the outcome. We know that God has, given us this very clear vision for what he's calling us to do. But I don't think he's asking us to do it sprinting to get there. I don't think he did that. Biblically, you talk in so many instances of Jesus and how he starts with a story and people are like, get to the point, man.
What's this all about?
Why are you walking so slow? Why are you just hanging and chilling with these people? We need to be going somewhere. And the disciples are going, let's go. And he's like, I'm just hanging, man.
Yeah.
And the pace is biblical of the way that Jesus lived his life. So I love that, but it's so like the world that we live in, the culture of everything else around us doesn't go at that pace.
Yeah.
In every way, shape, and form. I live at that pace more than I would ever want to be. And I think that's the case for people in ministry and thinking this is Sundays don't stop coming.
Totally.
We have to run, we have to do this thing, we have to crank this project out. We have another Mother's Day, we have another Father's Day, we got whatever other, special things you're doing.
And I mean, we're, for better or worse, we're results-oriented people. We want to see the fruit of our labor, and we want to see it today. We want to see life change. We want to see transformation, and we want it to happen now. And years and years ago, I was in Germany, and I visited this cathedral in Cologne, and I'm walking through this incredible cathedral, reading this tiny little brochure, telling me that it took something like 550 years to build this place.
Yeah.
And I started imagining, I'm standing on these like hundreds of year old tiles on the floor. And I started thinking about all of the work underneath those tiles. Like forget the soaring ceilings and the stained glass above me. Like just what's underneath my feet took stonemasons hundreds of years, took a father and his son and his son and his son's son, and just who never saw anything rise into the air. They were just building a foundation. And it was resetting for me of just like, we want to see results now. And yet God's building a cathedral. And he's like, you're putting in a cornerstone. Thank you for your hard work. And I'm going to bless it. But like, it's just the foundation. Okay. It's
a word for somebody, right?
It right sizes it all for me.
That's good, man. I was curious, you mentioned a minute ago that pace is one of the things that are sort of a blocker for that coaching. I don't know, how would you even sum it up? That sort of bringing along the next generation. What are some of the other things that you've even identified in yourself that make you hesitate or kind of just pop up as a
totally?
I found an excuse to not do the thing that I think.
I like to be right.
Yeah.
And like the thing is, this is going to sound so, I'm really good at what I do. Like I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, telling stories. And so my instincts for what works and what doesn't are really, really good.
Yeah.
And to hold back from stepping on the toes of someone else who needs to develop their instincts, it's hard. And to also not find ways to not just tell them, but okay, one of the reasons I love stories is because stories give people the gift of discovery. The telling you a good life lesson does not stick in the same way as a life lesson that you have unpacked and found. That's the beauty of story. Like when you unpack a story and discover the hidden meaning at the bottom of it, you hold on to it in a totally different way. Likewise, as I'm trying to pass on this knowledge, I could with our staff or with our future collaborators or like, I could lead a masterclass or something. And there's probably a space for that. But like, somehow leading them to ask the right questions and to discover those things is so much more powerful, but requires so much more intention and patience on my part. It's harder work to help someone discover something than just tell them. Like my kids, like, can you please just pick up your clothes and put them in the laundry? I still haven't figured out how to get them to discover how great that can be.
If you figure it out, please let me know.
Right, exactly. So I just keep telling them, but telling them is not effective.
Probably some sort of financial incentive involved, I would guess.
Discover how you get $10 by just.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So not stepping on other people's toes, getting out of the way. I
think you haven't said this, but I think just from other conversations and even like my own experience leading teams and stuff, I think there's often a sense from people that are wrestling through this process too of what am I going to do? Right? So like, hey, maybe I'm really successful
If I
at
work
developing
myself out of a
3 or
job.
4 people that can just crush at this thing we're doing.
Yeah.
It's hard to picture your own place in that future. And I don't know, what has that been like for you?
Oh, that's absolutely there. Like questions of our own significance, right? It's hard wrestling kind of work. And that's I think what was really helpful about the 2 books that I read of you have to be confident enough in who you are, even apart from your work, that you don't need to build that ego anymore.
Yep.
And so before you can help teach other people to do the work, you have self-work you have to do. And that's not to say that I have done all of it, but again, God by his grace is in my best moments giving me the desire to do that self-work, to know who I am so that I don't have to grab onto things that I'm trying to give away.
It's good.
And I think, creatives, you're talking about stepping on toes. Creatives have very big toes. And they're just they're just larger and it's easier to step on their toes all the
They're
time.
always wearing sandals. Why? Why? They never have steel toe boots on.
Or just no shoes at all.
Right. Like, what's the
no
deal?
shoes at all.
And I think that's hard. It's hard to receive, whether it's criticism or feedback. I think it's hard to give it. I've talked about this in other episodes. Like I beat around the bush in everything I do, and I'm amazing at just like softening the blow on everything. Most of the time, not actually getting to the point of what I'm trying to convey. And I think looking back at your own life and going, "Hey, this is the work that I have to do before I'm able to truly coach somebody in a way that they can understand," or not just telling them what to do and saying, we don't like that thing that you did in this project. Bringing it back to story in your own life and just going, hey, here's an experience that I've had that led me to something very similar to where we're at right now. And here's how what we did to get around it. And that in the same way, I remember stories and not facts.
Yeah.
That's why I love so much of this conversation, because I just go, so many things in my life, man. It's no, like I think of my kids and I go, don't jump on the bed. And you're going to fall off and, just like every mom has said or dad has said, you're going to, crack your head open. My dad, when he was 8 or 9 years old, fell off, jumped off the bed and, had 12 stitches like in his head. And he shows, and I go, kids, come look at grandpa's head. See the scar? This is what we don't want to do. It's a story. And I go, oh, that's a different remembering, remembering of why to do something one way or to not do something another way. But if I just go, well, I heard somebody say, don't jump on the bed because you'll fall off and hurt yourself. It's very different. But I love that.
I mean, I forget who the conversation was with, but I was listening to one of the other episodes and you guys said like, clarity is kindness. And I think that was really eye-opening for me when I came to Willow. Prior to that, I heard a lot of really good things. Like people were out to build my self-confidence. And there was probably a lot of beating around the bush. Or I think sometimes I was just maybe not able to hear the criticism and could only hear good. But I got a lot of encouragement. And then when I came to Willow, I still got a lot of encouragement. But like I heard the truth too.
Mm.
And I was told very clearly when things sucked. And it made me so much better.
Yeah.
And so I've realized for myself, because I'm like you, I want to be liked. I want everyone to be having a good time. And I want to soften the blow as much as I can. But like, you got to tell people when they're not hitting the mark, because in them, they want to. Most people want to do the best.
Yeah.
But they don't always see where they're not. And you have to be able to tell them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy, I think, in church to beat around the bush in the way you're talking to people, because, maybe this is in another episode that hasn't come out. I don't know. But it's so easy to soften that blow because we're in church. We don't want to make people ruffled and frustrated. But you're right. Like, the amount of times that deep down I am longing for that feedback and just going, I want to know, like, am I sucking? Am I doing this right? Am I not? And I think, like, it's amazing how even in really difficult seasons, especially in ministry, there might have been really, I'm sure, challenging things that you heard in criticism or critiques in the way that people were talking about something that you had your head down in for months at a time. But when you think back to your ministry, and you said it earlier, like, your time at Willow Creek was some of the best years of your life, right? And it's amazing what God does, I think, in our own lives, and the way that we're wired to look back and remember the good things and not all of the bad things, especially when you're running, and thinking, man, this was a really hard season in my life. I can't wait for the next thing, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Whether you're kicking and screaming or you're excited to run to the next thing. God is an amazing way of looking back and going, you're learning from those things, and you don't think back to all those difficult conversations. You think back to the incredible moments that happened, and the people that you were with, and the relationships that you built at all of these churches you've been on staff at. And
I think so much of that, though, is an intentional choice of what sort of perspective and lens am I going to apply to my experience. Because there are a lot of people who look back and they only remember the negative things or the hard times. And it's not to say that those things didn't happen. They totally happened. But we're all placing a filter or a lens over our experiences and using that to determine, what are the things that I'm going to let stay with me? And what are the things I'm going to carry forward from here? Are they things that are negative? Are they things that are bringing me down? Are they things that are not creating the kind of person that I want to be in the future? Or are they things that I'm actually letting inspire me and challenge me, and I'm going to use them to fuel the person that I want to be in the future? So I think that is a choice that a lot of people, some people intentionally make it. Some people maybe unintentionally, are letting those things happen and not sifting, right? And kind of thinking about, how do I renew these experiences in a way that actually propels me further?
Yeah, that's really well said.
So as we're, kind of wrapping this conversation up, as you, and I think of the audience, right, that listens to this podcast, and so many creative people that were in the roles that you were in, both from a filmmaker to creative director, producing, programming director, whatever it is. How would you encourage them early in their career or middle of their career, as they're asking those same questions? God, you brought me to this church. You brought me to this thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to continue to make this better. Creativity is so challenging, just like you're saying, like the idea, man. You're like, I have to create another one tomorrow. And I thought,
will I ever have another good idea?
Correct. Correct. What would you, how would you encourage them, or to look at things differently? As they're kind of going about that in their own daily life?
This is the part where I'm supposed to just drop some.
Boom.
Say whatever you want.
Just drop the mic of wisdom.
You can just say pass. It's fine.
No, I think I wish more of us, myself included, would think of church as the training ground. For one, I think the church as we know it today is training for heaven. I think it's training for the future kingdom.
Mm.
But also, and I said it before, so much of what I have learned to do, I learned first in the church. The church was the place where I had the room to try and fail in my early days when I was trying to write and create and figure out how to tell a story. I had a church who let me be really awful at it so that occasionally I could be good at it. I think sometimes we believe and we know that the stakes are high. I mean, we're talking about life and death when we're doing this church work. But at the same time, like, God can smooth it over. All of the failures, all of the mistakes, when we give room for someone to try and they fail, God can still do miraculous things in it, through it, above it, beyond it. I think sometimes we like to think that if we do it perfectly, God will move more powerfully. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
At one point in a really challenging season where I was just feeling like I'm not enough. Like I'm not enough for my wife. I'm not enough for my kids. I'm not enough at work. I'm not enough for me. A friend spoke into my life and just had this picture. He said, I keep picturing this like dry and cracked desert, and the fissures are deep. The cracks are deep. And then this flood comes in and it fills in all the cracks first and then just keeps on filling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to think about God and his Spirit in that way. Our efforts are always going to have cracks.
Yeah.
Let's make room for more cracks because those are the first things God's going to fill.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good piece of wisdom.
Well, I think it was
It's huge,
It
man.
was a picture that God gave them for me, but I don't think it's just for me. So all credit to him.
Yeah, man. Thank you for so many just amazing parts of, I think just this conversation that are very deeply impactful for me, and I think of myself in so many of those different scenarios in the same way. It goes back to man's story and taking that back into my own context and going, oh man, I've lived through a little bit of those dry desert cracks.
Yeah.
And, longing for the Holy Spirit to fill some of them quickly and bring some rain to do it,
Right.
But again, thank you. This is amazing. One more time, as people are wanting to check out Braving Bird, where can they find that and get in contact with you if they're interested in reaching out?
Absolutely. You can go to bravingbird.com. All of our videos are available there. They can be downloaded for free. You can use them wherever, whenever, to your heart's content. We've also got stuff on YouTube that's easy to share and stuff if you just want to be able to send someone a link to a story that meant a lot to you. And if you ever want to get in touch with me, it's nick@bravingbird.com.
Awesome.
Love to chat.
Dude,
Thanks so much, man.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure.